Welcome to the Innovation Café in the Kazerne. My name is Charlotte Groen. I'm also a designer based in Eindhoven. I'm a social designer and a strategic designer. But today is not about me. Today is about our speakers, Dzera and Zheyuan. First of all, I would like to tell you a little bit about the Innovation Café. This is a gathering, inspirational session that we have every week here at the Kazerne. But every week we have different kind of speakers, but always design and tech. We are here at Brainport, and Brainport is all about tech and design. But I'm also curious a little bit about our audience that we have today. Are there designers here today? Can you please stand up? No designers? One designer. Yeah, me too. René, you're also a designer. Okay. Do we also have scientists here? Or people who work with tech is also more. Okay. And today is about AI. And I'm also curious, who of you is working with AI? Not working in AI, but with AI. Do you use AI? Betsy? Google Translate. Well, is Google Translate AI? Yeah? More or less. Okay, true. Well, today we will talk about the personal, also a little bit of personal relationship between AI and people, and also about AI and emotions. So please give a big applause to Dzera, who will first present.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, thank you very much, Charlotte, for the introduction. Really nice to be here. Actually, extra nice for me because I think my journey has kind of gone from design through kind of neuroscience into tech. So this is really nice. Thank you, Betsy, for inviting me as well. So I am an impact entrepreneur, and I'm a co-founder of Maaind. We're a neurotechnology and AI startup that I've been running for the last few years. But as I said, I started my journey in design. So before I kind of tell you what we do at the company, I wanted to share a little bit of kind of why I started it, and also, what I guess the kind of why I thought it was important to build something. And this is now maybe 6 years ago when I kind of really actively started this journey. So I studied design in London at Central St. Martin's, and London was a really nice environment to kind of explore a lot of things. There's a lot happening. But what very early on I kind of realized was that it was very siloed. So my interests were quite broad. I was always interested in the psychology or understanding human experience, and in design. So there's quite a lot of that, and depending on which discipline you're in. But I also kind of started realizing the more I learned and I started reading research on neuroscience and really the kind of the understanding of the brain that we had already at that point. So that's maybe, I don't know, like 7-8 years ago. There was this really big gap between what was happening in neuroscience research and what we already understood about the brain, about how the different processes in the brain and how different things impact our the physiology, right, and how that manifests in different behaviors. And then on the other hand, as designers creating experiences, we didn't really have that, what I call neuroscience literacy. So I kind of quite literally became obsessed about this neuroscience literacy and really wanting to kind of bring that cutting-edge science to everyone. So again, not just designers, but any creators, even say as parents, right? So when I kind of became a parent, I also thought, well, how do I not know this? Because, there's so much in what we understand about how the brain develops and how things impact the brain, impacts my behaviors, impacts my interactions at work, at home, and so forth. And later on, so I think at the time it was very much just something that excited me, a drive that I had. I couldn't quite logically reason, right? So it was also AI was something very I guess people working in AI would say, okay, AI goes way back. There was a lot of winters. Nobody was kind of sure where. So most people didn't really know the term. But when I came across that and I realized kind of the potential of that, so I became also curious. Well, if you combine the technology, so on the one hand, neuroscience, the kind of the sensor technology that we're developing to be able to detect different things, and then apply AI to really make sense of a lot of that. Like, what can we do and how far can we push how we design things? And so I guess the common theme for me was, regardless, so I think whether you're a designer, scientist, engineer, or parent, everything kind of we do revolves around human experience, right? So when we're designing, again, whether you're solving a problem and trying to improve a certain experience, or you're just designing a beautiful, space, it kind of all revolves around having a certain impact on humans, right? And so that understanding of how humans operate felt really, really important. I just want to share one slide, which kind of, for me, was a really big, just kind of put it together. But basically, the kind of understanding the senses that we have and how much, so that's basically our interface with reality, right? So if you really kind of, it seems obvious, but I think when I started looking into that, at least, right, and just realizing that, my experience of reality is really, to a large degree, subjective. And such a big part of it is not actually, I'm unconscious of it, what's going on. So you have, what I just kind of put here is just the five senses through which we get like most of our information. And essentially the information that I get, through my eyes or through my ears, it's meaningless, right? So it doesn't have any inherent meaning. But in real time, our bodies, our brains are processing this information. And a lot of what's being processed has to also be filtered out, right? Because there's just such a vast amount of it. And for me to have this real-time experience of kind of seeing, of hearing, the brain really has to kind of work really, really hard. And there are different parts of the brain, obviously the process information coming from different parts, and you have a separate part that kind of makes sense of that and combines that, like with your memory and with other things. So kind of deep diving into all those processes, and then also realize that a lot of times things can really, well, for one, go wrong, right? So if you have, certain deviations from, say, a certain way of processing, or, if you have traumatic experience, or if you have something kind of more severe in terms of kind of how that manifests, then your experience of reality can be completely altered. So in a sense, although we're all kind of in the same space here, but each of our experience of this moment is very unique to us at the same time. And so I think after kind of realizing that and really questioning, well, can we use that understanding in kind of in how we design things better on the one hand, and on the other hand, the technology is going to evolve, right? So we kind of largely, because so much of our behaviors is driven by processes that we don't really understand. Some of those are kind of evolutionary hardwired. Others, things just impact us because we didn't sleep enough, or, so we have a lot of these behaviors that sometimes we are aware of, but sometimes, we kind of just responding to. So it really started with me wanting to build a tool to help myself, to kind of understand myself better. And then gradually, I think the more I kind of dived into that, I realized that, that there is a space to kind of create something to enable designing experiences that can really more mindfully be designed for well-being. So it's sort of a well-being by design, because sometimes we can have unintended negative consequences, just because we don't know, ourselves, or also when we kind of design things. And so I met my co-founder at the time, and he was doing his PhD on kind of neuroadaptive systems. And essentially what it was taking the measurements of physiological states, so your stress or your, well, at that point, so he was doing his PhD on attention, so he would kind of do tasks where he would record people doing attention tasks, and then he would give them stimuli, so the AI system would learn how the error rate and the speed and the error rate, right? And then based on that, it would just give little triggers and signals to try and improve that. And the system would kind of observe what it does, and it would improve it. And I was completely blown away because I was one of his guinea pigs at the time. And I did quite a few tasks. They're really boring, like kind of really simple tasks where you just, numbers appear and you kind of just have to respond with pressing a button. And I was really fascinated because the trials where I thought I actually performed well, I did worse. And there were quite a few situations, right, where my really confident awareness of, what I thought I had done was completely off with the data that he had. So that kind of started that journey. So we decided his work at the time was kind of on this very advanced systems. It wasn't something for the general public. A lot of this research, even to this day, is kind of more in the military domain and really deep tech academia. So we wanted to bring it to the kind of to everyday solutions. And just to kind of this is very high level, obviously, what neuroadaptive AI means, which is kind of what we're building and specializing, is this real-time personalization of basically where you can measure, and I'll go in a bit more detail what it is, but basically you can measure the signals of so your stress, your emotion state. Then through recognizing that state, you can inform the environment to kind of say, okay, this is kind of your stress state. You can maybe change, depending on the use case, you can change the light, you can adjust temperature, you can play certain type of music, and then it measures again the kind of the impact that it has, if it's back, so then you have this kind of continuously learning loop powered by machine learning. And so in practice, all it does is, it basically can kind of get you through a measurement from, one state to another. So this is kind of just a simple way to, so where you kind of work to increase whatever parameters are imported at any given time. So this is, the only kind of diagram, so I'm not putting any kind of technical things here. But so essentially what our platform kind of does in just high-level way, so we basically process, so we use voice as a primary modality because we speak all the time, so it's, something very natural, and you can extract a lot of data to detect the stress and state of the person from voice. We don't look at the content, it's also more for privacy reasons, we can kind of work with it better than something like computer vision, but generally we kind of work with, depending on the use case, what makes sense. So we also take wearable data and contextual data, so like things like time of the day, where you are location-wise, again, depending on the use case. So we work quite a bit in automotive with cars. I'll cover that in a minute. And so basically, by taking that measurement, then you can kind of, once the system is embedded in different products, then, you can kind of personalize experience that way. So yeah, this is kind of just a bit of a flow of kind of how that works from a user's perspective. And so obviously you can use the parts separately, so you can just use mood or state detection if kind of that's what you need. So that's why we kind of position it with two parts. But the kind of the longer term vision for us is really to have this kind of system that really knows you and, that kind of adapts to the user state. And for us, so I think that there's kind of a twofold thing there for us, where on the one hand, we wanted to really give people an ability to better understand themselves, so to give insights into how they are so they can make better decisions and just really understand what influences them and make those adjustments. But on the other hand, as products are getting increasingly smarter, so you have more kind of natural interaction with those digital products that are kind of driving your behavior. I think at the moment we have that in the apps that we use and, you know, some smart products at home, but we as users don't necessarily know, right? So they're designed, and whatever the kind of the goals of the company that designs the product, whether it's to increase your engagement or to understand what you like, but ultimately that data is not something that's necessarily optimized for your well-being, or, you know, you don't really kind of know what it's used for. So as a company, our mission is to improve global state of well-being, and by bringing emotional intelligence to everyday products. And so it's kind of that twofold relationship between, on the one hand, helping people to really better understand themselves, to understand where, you know, their behaviors, kind of to improve their experience and quality of life and interactions that they might have. And on the other hand, to ensure that as we're developing these different technologies, so, you know, AI, like right now, obviously, there's been a big hype around agents, right? This kind of LLM, conversational agents. It's very interesting, actually, because when we were starting, you know, everyone was like, yeah, all this stuff is kind of really long away. We were just talking about that earlier. And for me, as an outsider at the time, you know, this was all kind of very new to me. I think a lot of the people that work on technology, they felt it was a little bit further away. But then I think as an outsider, I was wondering, like, once it's there and kind of once people start really applying and using, even if it's not that advanced, but, you know, you can really go, I think, very far creatively once you start coming up with use cases and kind of using different bits of technology that might in itself not be that advanced, but it kind of, the impact that it has when it comes to applications. So through kind of, again, we are a startup as a company, so we spend a lot of time doing research in the early phases. And then when we kind of started thinking where to apply that technology and, you know, how to really bring it into the real world, into the outside of the kind of the lab environment, we thought we'd focus on 3 areas. So where people spend the most time, which is at home, at work, and on the go. And we spent significant amount of time in mobility and automotive. One reason was for research purposes as well. It's quite a closed space and environment, so we could really test and kind of try different things there. And we were very lucky as well to have some really early good customers and work with some big brands who, you know, really wanted to going in that direction already, whether for improving the experience of their drivers or starting to look into autonomous vehicles and thinking, well, what does the experience in a car look like when people don't have to drive themselves anymore, right? When they kind of have a lot of that time to really spend on something else. We also explored well-being. So again, the technology can be embedded in like well-being apps to support people to manage their time, their productivity, you know, their stress. So it could be something as simple as just giving you a break at the right time once it kind of knows what you've been on calls, and giving you kind of feedback on your state. Smart homes is something we've played around a little bit. We haven't worked too much, but we kind of look at everything. So from like gaming companies to smart like interiors, architecture firms, and that's something that we're looking. So kind of the thing mobility is something that we know quite well now, and the other two is something that we're really looking to do more work in and really explore. So yeah, if any of you are in that space, it would be great to talk. And yeah, just to kind of wrap up, as I said, as a company, we focus really on building that technology and on trying to create a product together. But what we haven't done enough, I think, is really kind of more exploratory, wider use cases. And this is something that I really want to focus on more now, because we oftentimes the companies, they really like the technology, but they don't necessarily know how to apply it, or, you know, they need further support with really innovating in terms of just improving their product, or just thinking and getting more creative how to do that. And so what we're starting to do now is, it's kind of still early days in the sense it's not fully public, but we're now building kind of a team around that to really bring more designers and neuroscientists to support in designing, and obviously commercially as well, to make sure that the product works within the current range. And so these are some of the areas where we've had interest from, again, that we kind of, for some part, had to stop and didn't really go into, but these are some of the areas that we'll be very keen to explore, and we'll do our own project where we'll kind of initiate to really get people to think of use cases, how this technology can be kind of built and applied, and also work with organizations in the spaces that, you know, that want to, just want to understand kind of how the technology can benefit them. And I think that about sums up my presentation.
Thank you, Zara. Big applause for Zara. Thank you. Well, I have a question.
Yes.
After the presentation of Julian, you can also ask a question. Just a personal question, because you told me that you developed a well-being app yourself in the beginning, just to help yourself.
Yeah.
What can you give us an example that helped you with? What was?
Yeah, so it was just simple. It was tracking my my stress levels, my moods throughout the day, and I had a persistent. Well, actually, this version of that is still present in some of our use cases. So you kind of had a constant awareness of your state there, and sometimes it would suggest, so it automate and give me some music to play. But for me, it was more than anything just an awareness to, just to see kind of what state I was in. Because what I started noticing that sometimes I was able to do certain type of work better than others, so it really kind of connected the different things I was doing in my life to bring me better awareness of my state.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. This was more of the technical presentation. Now we have the designer, Julian. Please come and join us.
So hi everyone. Thank you for coming. And my name is Julian, and have a bit of slides here. Yes, I'm from China originally. So my Chinese name is Zheyuan, but I think most of you couldn't pronounce Zheyuan, so you can feel free to call me Julian. I graduated from the Royal College of Art in London at 2019. After my graduation, I was in Eindhoven for Dutch Design Week 2019, and we showcased our work as a group of designers from the Royal College of Art, and that's when I felt like, oh my God, Dutch Design Week, and also Eindhoven as a whole is a really creative and nice space. So I'm sort of kind of intertwined with the Dutch Design Week and Eindhoven since then. I was in the Design Week for 5 consecutive years, so this year is my 5th year here, and I'm now also doing a PhD apart from the artistic or design work I'm doing. I'm also kind of working on the research project. I'm going to cover this a bit later. So I also started a small design studio called Inneract. So the name I think explains a little bit of what we are focusing on. Is basically we want to kind of explore and research and design for people's inner activity, which is the maybe some of the neuroscience or some of the psychological maybe feelings or events that and how technologies and how designed technologies and designed experiences can affect these sorts of experience and events. So I would start from the immersive healing art. This is a name that we gave ourselves to cover the thread of the artwork that we are creating since 2019. So what is the concept of the immersive healing art? So it's basically, it's pretty like what Dzera's talking about, is basically artwork or art experience that makes you feel more aware of your emotions or more aware of your body or your feelings. So we usually integrate 3 parts. So besides seeing and interacting with the artwork, you can get a chance to reflect as well. So the artwork is called immersive, but it can be also quite portable as well. So we have worked on several cases where it's like a solo, like this one, so solo screen, and also maybe surrounded screen and immersive projections or screens, of course. So in the first stage, this is what I showed in Dutch Design Week 2019. It's based on my master's thesis, where I developed a AI-generated artwork, but it's an older algorithm because it's in 2019, so there are no ChatGPT and SOA and etc. etc. So this is like an older algorithm called the generative adversarial neural network. And after creating several, like actually countless images, I then devoted myself into creating a little kind of classification network that can basically classify all the nonsense or all the non-labeled artwork into emotional labeled works, and that basically puts us into the work of the Inneract studio and kickstart our work. So one of the major or one of the main cases we worked for is for the one of the largest hospitals in London is it's called Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. This is during COVID. So in the COVID period, we implemented the interactive artwork for healthcare professionals. This is actually right outside the ICU ward, so it's really kind of stressful situations happening inside. So we sort of implement this work in the entrance to the ICU so that both staff and patients could have a brief moment reflecting on their emotions and making. So this is embedded with emotion detection using a camera. So it's also using a little bit of AI, but it's not recording for privacy and anonymity kind of reasons. But basically, it reads your emotions through a small camera and feedback to you using the images that's generated by the network. So this is this was in the hospital throughout the COVID period and was taken down because after the COVID went to a round of renovation, and we got some of the coverage, including the Dutch Design Week, which we did enjoy it and we got inspired a lot from. And then we kind of went into further direction after exhibiting some of the work in the venues over the world. And this brings us to the second stage of our creating the like interactive work, which is the incorporation of natural rhythms. So I am personally really intrigued. I think most of us are intrigued by all the movements or rhythms or dynamic kind of movements by nature in nature. So in the second stage, we sort of use the inspiration from a water body, and we created rippling senses. This is more dynamic and moving artwork that you could see here, and it is also implemented in the hospital for over 2 years after COVID, and it was in a corridor outside the canteen where healthcare staff and patients go usually in their lunchtime. So it's interactive to your body movements and facial expression, and it basically helps you to reflect and helps you maybe agitate or stimulate you to move more and to make funny faces and think of your emotional status a little bit more. And this also during the project, we also did a small, I think Dzera will definitely know something about this. We did a small experiment. What's funny is that after 3 minutes of people seeing the rippling work, even if it's in 2D, all the particles are in two-dimensional, and all the like the color patterns are kind of set. We still found quite intriguing kind of emotional feedback. But this is really a small sample that we did with the AI and robotics labs, but in Shenzhen. But we are actually working on a larger scale of experiments currently as well. And after the second stage was tested and launched in the hospital, we brought this to the Design Week in 2022, so 2 years ago. And the curators and the managers helped us to realize a really large-scale exhibition, and this we really got a lot of feedback, and it was a really kind of impressive work, even from our perspective. So it's actually also the first time we've seen our own work being kind of displayed onto a 4 meters times 2 meters wall, and it's right in the entrance of the Hall 4 in Krachbau venue. And but the interaction and also the overall experience are quite similar to previous versions. Yes, you could see people are coming and enjoying, especially kids loved it. Yeah, you can see here. And there are also people dancing in front of it, which makes me really, really gratitude. And, yeah. So after the Dutch Design Week, we got a lot of feedback, and many of the feedback actually tackles or questioned or criticized our ability to engage audiences through a longer period. Because when you see the two-dimensional work, if you see it and you play with it, it may be intriguing and engaging for a while, but then after a period, people get bored. So that's why we went for another 2 years of work and found a new system, or developed a new system, and it's basically targeting a similar kind of dynamics, which is the water body dynamic. We are now using a more three-dimensional and more dynamic algorithm and system to represent it. And now it is more kind of it's absolutely more dynamic, and it's more ever-changing in the case that it can be engaging the audience for a longer period, and people could see more intricate and more detailed movements. And we also launched this work in another London hospital. It's called West Middlesex University Hospital. This is in their entrance hall, and it's also, the setup is pretty similar to this one here. Even the screen size is quite similar. And you can also interact with it while you enter the hospital. Goal is to give people a refreshing kind of perspective or refreshing kind of experience when they enter the hospital. And also in another project, we implemented the digital artwork in a sleep pod, and this is mostly for healthcare professionals, but patients sometimes get to use it as well. But this is in a sleep pod, we found it's actually very different. So people usually less likely to move for sure while they are lying, but the intricacy or the aspects where it detects people's kind of facial expression and input is quite welcomed, and was also quite kind of largely discussed as well. Also, besides the artistic work, me, myself, and also as a small studio, we also are working on several commissioned work, both by charities and by the hospital as well. So this is one of the representing work that we are working on right now. This is also in the West Middlesex University Hospital, where this is basically the stroke patients, the ward for the stroke patients. So in the ward, you could only see maybe relatives or carers who can move around. All the patients are stabilized for at least maybe 1 or 2 weeks in the ward. And what's worse is that over the window there, if you could see on the left-hand side, the window of the stroke patients are all covered because there's a construction going on for the next 2 years. And so this is when we feel like we got feedback from staff and patients that some of the, especially older patients who just had stroke, wasn't able to feel time at all, and they lost the sense of the outside world. So this is when we eventually decided to develop a real-time kind of nature sanctuary for the stroke ward patients, and we will basically replicate a corner of the hospital garden and the system will incorporate real-time data and weather data to basically give people a sense of the real-time kind of temperature and weather. Especially in London, the weather is always changing, and also they will give you a sense of time and reconnection with the outside world. And this project is still developing, but we are aiming to launch it in next month, before end of November. And also another project I'm working on personally is my PhD research project. You could see that it's almost a similar setup with the sensors and screens, but in this project we are working on more maybe realistic other than artistic project. So we are taking on the, we basically want to explore the usefulness or the benefits of body movements, especially the planned or schemed body movement represented by yoga movements and Tai Chi movements. And we would like to develop a kind of real-time feedback interactive game for healthcare professionals to relax and to feel kind of refreshed for a shorter period of time in their busy and hectic days. And at the end of the presentation, I would like to share some of the insights or some of the feelings or thoughts that I had throughout the process of designing, either for charities or NGOs, and also for healthcare staff and healthcare scenarios or patients in the healthcare scenarios. So first of all, I think as a designer, we often get questioned about the final product or the final kind of design outcome that we had or we created, especially on the point that if we could engage the final users. So I found several reports and scientific papers saying that all the mental health apps or all the digital health apps are kind of lacking in the user engagement. Basically, maybe 1 out of 100 users will use it again after download, after 1 day of downloading the app. So that is a huge problem now, generally admitted by the researchers and by the scientists in the digital health field. So I think from a designer's perspective, from a design perspective, I think it is quite important for all designers to think of like, how do we incorporate end users using this sort of participatory or kind of user-centric perspective to increase or to develop engaging products. And the second one is to is one of the biggest thoughts and feelings I got from all the years of creating these sorts of works, is that we could actually use some of the magic in design to facilitate user engagement, but for a more meaningful and for a better kind of reason, not only for the commercial value or not only for the value of increasing active users for companies or for commercial projects. And also, I think it's also quite important for, this is mostly for the designer communities, is that we actually, it is quite important for us to work with scientists and maybe researchers in the field to get them on board, because as in the time I'm working in a hospital setting, us as designers get questioned by resident psychologists and by neuropsychologists and saying what's our impact or how to quantify our impact to the real world or to the patients and to the staff. So this is why I'm thinking it's quite important for designers to engage in the sort of studies and practices with outside experts and specialists to make the work more engaged and have more specialists on board. Thank you so much. This is my thoughts and feelings for your project. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zheyuan. Thank you. You can please hold it. No, you can hold it, because I have a question for you.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think other people from the audience also have questions. Betsy's already waving. I'll come to you 1 second. Thank you so much for your presentation. And what I find very interesting is that you gave also AI a bit of a face. Because for me as an image thinker, how does AI look like? I work with it and I give it a name. You know, Chat is my ChatGPT. I always work with Chat. He's available whenever I want. Yeah. But giving it a face and, you know, interact with it also helps you to engage more. Yeah. Thank you. That's really interesting, inspiring.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
Sarah, please come and join us as well.
Shall we?
Yeah. Yeah, do you have, like, are there questions from the audience? Betsy, you have to share the mic a little bit because we only have 2 mics. Yes.
I mean, actually, I give the floor first to Dzera, and maybe you will have a question for him, because I think the interaction between you guys is more important, maybe to witness. Do you have a question for him, or?
Maybe you should ask your question, then we'll go back.
Okay, well, my question kind of does relate to both of them in a funny way, is I see what you're doing, which is really beautiful, and you're sort of more of the artist, and I think Dzera's more of the practical application specialist, you know, the way I'm looking at it, I don't know. And I'm just thinking to myself, you know, have you really thought about into the collaboration with companies, like, because I think of a couple companies in mind who make VR immersive spaces, you know, and you could be like one of their features or something like that. I don't know if that's something you've thought of that.
Yeah, it's. I actually haven't spent too much time reaching out to companies. I mean, it's definitely feasible, or I'm definitely keen on exploring the extended reality aspects, AR or VR or whatsoever. But yeah, I think it's definitely one of the future directions that we could explore. I mean, basically the screen is still quite limited. In order to, I mean, maybe Dzera, you know this more than me. In order to increase the impact of the stimuli, maybe the immersive or the truly kind of surrounded experience is the one direction that we could go for. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm kind of buried my head in the work and especially in the PhD for the last several years. So I mean, it's really kind of important. I know it's to reach out and to seek out practical companies or practical talents, but yeah, for now, I'm kind of still at the very beginning to a more broader impact or to a more broader kind of application of the project. Yeah.
Yeah, no, so now just to add to that, this is quite interesting because we have the other issue, right? And that's kind of why I want to do this lab and focus more on actually doing this sort of collaborations. And we were talking about it just before we started, because on our end, because we went down we're a company, we're a technology company, we're a startup, right? So, but you all know too well about this, right? You're building a product, how do you commercialize it? You know, where do you bring the value? So we've also focused very narrowly on trying to actually productize something that bring value to our customers, and you know, so you kind of get really caught up in a very narrow field of business, essentially in commercial things, and then projects like this, okay, that's nice, but you know, then where does that go? You know, so I think there's definitely that space, and that's something I'm personally really interested in, to create space for that to explore. And on the VR side, we actually did some work there. Again, it's not something we pursued, but that was very interesting. So it was a kind of educational experience. So it was part of the X Prize, this big competition in the US. And we went through, I think we were like one of the 10 finalist teams. So we created a consortium with some researchers in London that were doing on mixed reality. They actually did astronaut training. So there's some really nice multidisciplinary team. And so we were one of the startups providing this kind of neuroadaptive personalization. And that was interesting. So you kind of essentially had to the challenge was to upskill people, so people that didn't have kind of formal education. So how do you prepare them and train them in a very quick period of time? And some of that involved some of this kind of more immersive work, because we talked about literacy before. Yeah. So people that don't know how to process because maybe they're lacking training or education, or that really training of knowing how to study. So how can you engage people to still achieve the result where you can kind of educate and upskill them? And so there's some really interesting use cases there to explore. Yeah.
Does that satisfy your...
Yeah, I guess also one thing that the application people understand that maybe the artists are less concerned with, but it sounds like you're getting to that point, is the word validation. We are constantly, as commercial people, validating through whether or not someone will pay for something, whether a solution or a product is worth something, right? We're always validating. We're constantly going through open-ended questions, asking, and I think that's where collaborations like this kind of help you go in different directions, because you validate what people find value in what you're doing. I think that's, I don't know, just...
Thank you. Thank you. We have another question. Yes.
Yeah, for Julian. I'm also working on these kind of things with interactive and immersive experiences, and my personal preference goes more in the direction of projections, and maybe even integrating light. For example, I'm keep looking at that panel, integrating light in objects around you. Is there any research that proves that projections or integrated lighting is more effective than a screen?
Right, that's a good question. I haven't. Yes, I think there is one research. I can immediately think of one paper done by a group of researchers in the hospital as well. They basically did 3 comparison groups. One is a HD screen, maybe smaller than this, and the other one is a VR with realistic nature documentaries, and the last one is the VR with 3D VR, basically the VR that you build in Unity or other game engines. And they found that, yes, as you said, maybe the immersive, but they haven't tested projection. They only tested VR real nature versus VR 3D nature and screen nature. They found that VR is actually more impactful for doctors. I think that research is only on doctors, but I mean the perspective of it really kind of combined with real life objects is also quite intriguing as well, because if we think about it, virtual reality, it sounds really amazing, it sounds really exciting, but in the hospital it's actually quite limited, because hospital is a really kind of how do you say, it's a really tricky environment that you need everything to be infection controlled, because everyone's hand might be not well kind of sanitized before they touch anything. So I think the embodied or the like a physical interaction or this sort of maybe the like a sensor-based interaction is quite also important as well in the like interesting scenarios like hospitals. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So in terms of the natural interaction part, what I find a bit annoying in VR is that you have a headset. It's really on top of you, so it's not intuitive interaction as much as looking at something with light, for example.
Right. It's not really surprising, huh? When you walk by, you have to really put on the glasses and get into it. Yeah. And when you walk through this screen, and you get surprised by it or caught by it in the moment.
More natural, yeah.
There's also, maybe just to add, there's some interesting stuff about the kind of the multimodal experience or multisensory experience. So I don't know if that kind of applies to the type of work that you're doing and interested in. But, you know, so for example, when you add so haptics is something really powerful. We actually didn't expect in some of the work where we did. So we were different types of stimuli to invoke certain type of performance, let's say, right, to kind of improve, again, well-being or attention and stuff. And so between something like sound, visuals, haptics, meaning like vibrations. So vibrations are really powerful in different types of situations, and you can kind of invoke those through different type of experiences as well. So I think maybe looking, depending on what you're creating, on kind of what other modalities other than visual could be added, could be an interesting space to explore.
Interesting. Thank you. We have another question.
Yeah. First, thanks a lot for your presentations, especially the artwork is really beautiful. I have a question, maybe a bit more related to the art you presented. I'm very fascinated by fluid dynamics, and so why do you go via a screen and AI? So I think a bit like an open fireplace is doing something similar, right? So you could also go for the interaction with a real fluid phenomenon. So why did you choose this path? And it's maybe also a question for you. So when you want to control the mood, you could just use something else. Huh?
Yeah, maybe you didn't.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the important reasons is that the generated or the computer 3D kind of software-based fluid dynamics works can actually interact with you through whatever media you are, whatever medium you are on, like using a phone, whether it's using a phone or a screen or any like computer games or VR, etc., etc. But with real nature, it's kind of tricky to. I mean, it's definitely healing and it's definitely helpful, but it's tricky to kind of be implemented and to be packaged to different environments. I mean, with the rising power maybe of the computation power, we could potentially replicate. But it sounds also dystopian. But there are also some researchers doing replicating natures, which implemented into different environments. So, but I think I would, especially for the artistic work, I would really love to keep it more abstract, but borrowing the dynamics or borrowing the movements from nature, but keeping it still abstract, to steer it away a little bit from the real nature that you eventually will be belonging to. So I think that's some of my thoughts. Yeah.
Thank you. Dzera?
Do you want to?
Yeah, so if I understand your question correct, I think it's a very fundamental question that, like, why bother with all of this? You know, we have nature, this, and I think it comes out in a lot of contexts. And personally, if I need to, you know, look after my well-being, or if I'm having a bad day, the first thing I'm going to do is, can I go and get nature somewhere? I go for a walk, I go for exercise, you know, meditate, so I listen to music. But I guess for me it was so maybe about 10 years ago, I had this whole thing. I was very pro-nature, let's say, anti-tech, believe it or not. And there was a point where I think I started seeing technology as, so there's Kevin Kelly, so he's, I guess, techno-philosopher or something. So he's an American, and he's a designer as well, so he does a lot of work. So he coined this whole thing called technium, I think. So I watched his talk, and it was really profound kind of switch for me, where I realized that kind of technology is this natural step in human evolution, right? So you look language as a technology tools. And so then when I started seeing what's happening around with, you know, kind of where is the world going? So a little bit, yeah, in the here and now for me, and, you know, but then kind of zooming out, I thought, okay, that we are, I mean, the advancements in technology are happening very, very fast. And so I kind of chose to work in this space because I saw that I could bring a lot of my understanding and appreciation from maybe more human nature-centric approach to designing these systems that inevitably kind of will be in our lives, in our children's lives, and so forth. So I think that was a kind of thing for me. And another one is accessibility. So what Julian also alluded to, right? Sometimes you just can't do that, you know, like if we're lucky to have a beautiful forest nearby and I can go for a run here, but if you live in the city or if you are in a hospital, you know, bedbound, then, you know, there's just so many. So I think technology really opens opportunity, and if you can improve that where it's built with those values that we have in nature and we kind of incorporate them, so I think it just gives like access and makes it a little more accessible to other people.
Thank you. We have another question here.
Okay. Thank you for both presentations at first. Actually, I have two questions. One for... oh, okay. Okay, yeah. One for both. First one for Dzera. You're working on a personal wellness, and I was questioning myself in a working environment or even at home. There are multiple people, more people there, and I can imagine. So, how do you arrange that for example, in an office? Because one prefers to work with a low temperature, like a little cold, and the other one warm, and that's also affecting your well-being. So how do you account for that kind of conflicting situations?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So again, depending on the use case, so again, whether you're in the office, there's many people, or even in a car, right? You have like different people, and it's a much smaller environment as well. You can be in different states. So it depends on the application. So for example, in the office, you could kind of look at the collective average, right? So if you kind of just have a space, then you can kind of monitor based on, you know, the average of people, and kind of you adapt to that. You can have specific rooms or spaces as well. So it kind of needs a tailored approach based on the use case, but you can create, you know, separate rooms. What we're trying to do with some of the work we're doing is where there's a personal, so some of it's an app essentially, right? So like I said, you can embed it like broader or something like spaces like the work Julian is doing, but that won't be as personalized, obviously, to individual needs. It just overall, you know, if you can kind of create a more relaxing atmosphere based on kind of what the vibe is in the room. But in terms of workplace, so if you have this personal application that knows your state, right? So say it can maybe have some data from your calls, it knows how many calls you've been, which stressful calls, so it gives you personalized suggestions for you. So, you know, maybe like say when you can take a break, or your music. So we have Spotify integrations and integrations with the apps that you already have on the phone, for example, that you use. So those could be kind of suggested when is a good time to use them to bring you that awareness. And in the car, there's some other ways to do that as well, between kind of the front and back. So there's some custom work definitely that needs to be done, but that's where you can also really get creative to push the products further, right, and really kind of rethink the entire experience of a workplace or travel.
To continue on that, but maybe it's more for at the drinks.
Okay.
Isn't it dangerous to go out from the average person, because nobody is average? So, so you get but maybe it's something more to continue on the drinks. Yeah, because nobody.
I mean, I can ask, but so look, we're here in the room now, for example, right? So I mean, the average of what's happening in the room right now. So if you wanted. I mean, this room is curated right now to a degree, right? So if something starts happening, we kind of all have to adjust, and, you know, we all feel differently. But still, how do you create, you know, if the music was really, like, loud, you know, maybe it's not loud for me because I love loud music, but you couldn't hear me. So we kind of have to do that in social contact. But let's chat. I think this is a really interesting problem too.
A short question for Julian. I didn't expect that one. But I see on the backdrop over there that you're creating multisensory design, but to me it's now only targeted towards visual sensories and a little bit of audio too, because you showed one of them with speakers. So where are the other sensory? Are you thinking about implementing like smell also, because smell can adjust to happiness or sadness or whatever?
Yeah, that's. Thank you for the question. Yes, as you said, we are mostly working with the audio and the visual experiences, but with the olfactory experience, it's quite hard actually to recreate, especially. I mean, we are also open to more collaboration, but for now, what we are working on is, like also according to my limited knowledge, is that the smell or the sense is quite. I mean, the experience or the potential of recreating different smells and different olfactory experience is quite limited, and we haven't got. Maybe Dzera has more knowledge with that. But
that's some interesting work there. So I think it could be
right. But I mean, for now we haven't got maybe we just lack one experts to influence or to inspire us on the further more sensory works. Thank you.
I've already heard it the other way around, because you were talking about this multiple disciplined group that you're working on the research, and I didn't hear a designer, so I think we should talk a little bit further.
The design is definitely the part of the lab. Yeah. So I mean, I have been the only non-engineer and kind of technical, because I mean our entire team is kind of machine learning software and neuroscience, and that's been great. But I think that the design thinking was kind of, we'd bring designers, but it's it's always very practical. It's like, okay, what does the end user experience? So it's kind of just really going further into what does neuroadaptive interface, how, so I've developed a framework like for designing with biometric real-time data. So that's kind of the work that I want to do through the lab, because it really opens up space to kind of redesign and redefine how we design experiences.
We have only time for one more question. Luckily, we have drinks afterwards. Oh, sorry, I have to. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the interesting presentations. I have a specific question for Dzera. I'm a researcher in mental health field, and I have done my PhD in clinical psychology. And as a part of my PhD, we also developed a digital intervention for stress. And I think the big challenge was to keep participants engaged. So at the beginning, they were very motivated, but at some point, generally at the early stage, they just dropped out. So although we co-created this intervention together with participants, it was not the cure, actually. So I was wondering your experience with this. Do you have some, some preliminary findings about how many people started using this and how many participants just dropped out? Mm-hmm. Or if you have any approach to overcome this?
Thank you. That's a great point, and that's what Julian, you mentioned as well. So the retention of well-being apps is 1% plus minus. It's very, very low. And like you said, it's just keeping it engaged. So we've done some work and we've seen that as well, right? So because is a behavioral change, and the apps, so generally why we also thought, okay, can the measurement, and if we automate as much of that as possible, so it kind of tracks it for you, so it really doesn't require you to be opening the app, or, and to kind of manually have to do things, but provide you something useful. So we don't have it solved, but my approach, the way kind of how I want to, and again, it kind of goes into this territory, redefining the experiences altogether. It's like instead of developing a dedicated app for well-being, if it's an app, but can we, so I think from behaviorally, what do we already do, right, and that we can take useful data from that to then give awareness. So for example, one of the things we're looking at is work calls, right, so there's a lot of voice data for us, and so we analyze voice calls, we all do, remotely or not, right? So at least most of the people take calls. So if you have an assess and you take measurements, so say of my work day for a week, and you just need few, minutes throughout the day of different samples of different calls. So, that could give me a pretty good a report, let's say, right, on something on my state. I don't have to actively do anything beyond what I'm already doing, but nevertheless, there is that data that, could kind of show me, maybe certain patterns. And so this is the direction that I believe, and I really kind of want to explore further. How do we not introduce extra things for people to do, but we embed something into every day? So it's not a dedicated activity. It's just kind of part of what you're already doing. We're just getting that data and giving you the insights and then giving you suggestions to improve something that you will already be doing anyways.
Okay, we do one more question. I felt so guilty that I said no.
No worries, thank you. My question is for Dzera. I'm wondering because I'm imagining the use case in the car, and for example, there are moments where I'm tired and I need to be focused, right? Or there are moments where I'm stressed but I want to relax. So how does the algorithm knows? Is it like user input or does it make a suggestion? Because I understand the feedback is. Or getting the feedback is already a big part of it for yourself, but I was just wondering how it works.
Yeah, so I can kind of picture different scenarios. So it could be, so imagine a system, a smart system, right, where on the one hand, it's automatically it measures your state, so it takes your measurement through, if you have if you talk to the car, giving instructions, if you have wearables, that's an additional source. There's other ways. So cars already track, actually, for safety reasons, quite a lot, even through camera and stuff. So if you kind of, on the measurement side, that's happening. Again, you don't need to do much. And then on the personalization side, you could, again, it goes back to design and how do you design the interfaces, different routes you can go there. So one way you could say, okay, it's a system that has different modes. One is just an optimizing for better state in general. It's kind of like a neutral mode just to keep you in a good state. And so say if it notices that you're quite stressed, it'll be like, okay, let's just, change your music. And again, you either want to leave it to the user to make the choice, or the user can say, do you know what, like, let's just shut the system, let it do it. Or it can say it's a state. And then to the other question, like you said, sometimes, you're like maybe tired after work, right? And you kind of are stressed and you want to relax. Other times, you're actually low in energy and you're going to a meeting and you're like, okay, I really need to be in peak form. So similarly, like you can say, choose a playlist, right? That's what I do, right? When I go to run, I'm like, okay, I put the type of music that really is going to get me, and again, I do it manually. So in a similar fashion, imagine you just choose, a kind of a mode, and then you can even choose what goes into that. So that's similarly, again, in a car, but you can do that in other use case. So it's kind of you making a decision that's one of the ways to do it, like I said. But yeah, you can kind of get really creative, which is why, again, I really want to do more of that work to really actually design those experiences, because I think there's just so many possibilities how to do that.
Thank you. I think we have so much more to talk about. Thank God we have drinks afterwards. We can also still continue our dialogue. Thank you so much for being here. And the Innovation Café will be here every Thursday. Next week, also during Dutch Design Week. We have some surprise guests, so we will announce it very soon. And thank you so much for being here. And please bring your colleagues, friends, next time to our Innovation Café. Enjoy your drinks. Thank you. And thank you.
Thank you so much.